Good morning. My name is Heather Bauman, and I am honored to be your worship associate this morning. 20 years ago in Puyallup, Washington, I was a student at a conservative high school. Boy, it's a long time ago. High school is a tough time in a lot of children's lives, but something else made my high school hard for me. I began to feel deeply ashamed to be white. I was learning more about history, about colonization and Christianization, about the Trail of Tears, about how our own Puyallup Fairgrounds was turned into what was morbidly called Camp Harmony in order to imprison our innocent Asian American neighbors. And instead of knowing how to hold that knowledge with responsibility, I felt only guilt and shame. I didn't yet have the language for privilege. I only knew I didn't want to be associated with the harm that came from my skin color. So I tried in my own way to make up for what my ancestors did and what others like me were still doing. What did I do? I tried to pretend I wasn't white and dove headfirst into other cultures. I've always loved ancient Egypt, so I fell in love with the movements and rhythms that come with rock sharki, also known as belly dance. I learned Japanese and watched hours and hours of anime. Long before the Korean earworms of Golden and Gangnam Style, I was obsessed with K-pop groups like Shinhwa, One Time, and Classic-Y. These new interests cracked open a world that felt bigger, more creative, and more alive than the one that I knew. And they gave me something I was hungry for: connection. At the time, I thought this was the answer to the discomfort that I felt about being white. I thought that by immersing myself in positive aspects of other cultures, I could distance myself from the parts of my history that made me uneasy. This would all make it better, right? What I didn't yet understand was the difference between appreciation and understanding, or the simple fact that other cultures don't exist to resolve my discomfort. Here's the thing. As a white woman, I can put on a Middle Eastern dance costume and go by the Arabic name Zahra when I perform, but then I could take it off and be Heather again. I could speak Japanese and wear cosplays of anime and video game characters, but then I can take them off and be Heather again. It took me a while to realize that those from other cultures don't get to take off their skin color, their accent, or their names off. They can't go back to the unfortunate safety that being white gives me. I get to play dress up in their world and then take it off when I'm done. That isn't fair, not by a long shot. And for me to only acknowledge the good in their culture and history and ignore the bad, I was only repeating the same ignorance but with somebody else's culture. As I got older, my relationship with my own identity changed. I stopped seeing whiteness as something to be ashamed of, but began to see it as something that carries history, power, and responsibility, whether I like it or not. I learned I don't honor diversity by distancing myself from who I am, but by becoming more conscious of how I move through the world and how I can use that power to help others. My white privilege is not a personal failure, but a tool that can be used to help widen the circle of belonging, especially to those groups I don't identify with. As interesting as other cultures are to me, they are not a toy on a shelf that I can take and play with blindly. With belly dance, it was very important for me to learn that in many cultures it came from, this dance form was a way for women to bond, to strengthen their muscles for childbirth, and to celebrate each other, not for men's viewing. I also learned that being called a son of a dancer in Egypt was a really big insult. When I went to Egypt a few years ago, I was able to have a very insightful conversation with our Egyptian guide to learn more about how Egyptians view dancers. And even though I can't dance anymore, that strengthened my love and understanding of rock sharki and the women who kept it alive. Being able to take part in a different culture instead of just wearing its mask is an honor, and I'm grateful for all that I can learn about and participate in. So, what's so dangerous about diversity? It challenged the idea that my experience was the default. It revealed that identity isn't something we escape, but something we are called to examine. Diversity didn't ask me to stop being white. It asked me to start being conscious. Learning about accurate history made me feel bad, and I'm really grateful it did, because that discomfort wasn't harm, it was awareness. It taught me that feeling bad about something is not the same as doing wrong, but refusing to learn from it would have been. And that truth, uncomfortable as it is what allows us to choose responsibility over ignorance. Because discomfort is often the first sign that we are really telling the truth. And truth is what unsettles us, but it's where belonging really begins.
Our reading is an excerpt from The Reverse Bucket List by Richard Blanco. Walked across the dirt of my mother's childhood home in Cuba that she never stepped into again. Felt the bareness of her life under my feet, yet the abundance of the country she gave up gave me to understand her losses. Saw her never again gazing up at her dreams swaying in the backyard palm trees. Never again gossiping about boys' kisses with her sisters at the kitchen table on rainy days. Never again cradling her mother's face, even on the day she died without her. In 2014, I heard Eboo Patel, a Muslim interfaith activist and the author of the book Sacred Ground: Pluralism, Prejudice, and the Promise of America, speak at the Sewell Lecture at First Unitarian Church of Portland. I looked, but I wasn't able to find a written copy of this story, but as I remember it, he spoke of a very cold northern state. It was either northern Minnesota or North Dakota. And it was so cold in this rural area that the residents had a habit of leaving their cars unlocked because they knew that their neighbors might need to take refuge if a sudden storm came up. And then he spoke of how when more immigrants moved to the area, seeking jobs in an area that didn't have enough people to fill them, that at first, people started locking their car doors. The second story I remember reading somewhere was about a state fair in the Midwest. And a parent was talking to their children about where to meet up if they got lost. But everyone here is a Trump voter, so you'd probably be safe asking anybody for help. I'm guessing that many of us cringed a little at these stories. I know I did at the time. But even as we may chuckle nervously about people being afraid of folks that are different from them, I will tell you that I get scared when that big white pickup truck with the Trump flags on it rolls up and down the street. It is on some level normal. It is sad, but it is normal on some level to fear people who we perceive as being different from ourselves. Our job in that case is to put ourselves in position where we get to know people who seem different from ourselves. Before Deesa's parents had health problems, we used to go to the Sundance Film Festival together. I loved it. I loved seeing films, some full length and some just like 10 minutes long, that told me about the lives of people that I hadn't even imagined. A beekeeper from Macedonia, dancers from the country of Georgia, a family whose son went off to fight for ISIS and returned home protecting a young teenager who had become pregnant after being kidnapped by soldiers. He married her to keep her safe and brought her back to her parents' house, his parents' house. Film and books and art are a wonderful way to learn about the lives of people different from us. And the more we know people, the less we fear. Diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives have been a huge target of this administration. And as much as that makes us cringe at the ridiculous ways it's sometimes been implemented, my personal favorite is that photos of the plane, the Enola Gay, were originally flagged for removal based on a keyword search, though they have been restored. A tremendous amount of damage has been done to people and to programs based on this order. Shortly after taking office and installing Pete Hegseth as Secretary of Defense, Donald Trump fired the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, a black man, the commander of the Navy, a white woman, and the vice chief of the Air Force. Why? Because they were women or they were black, and therefore it must have been DEI that got them their jobs. In the huge rush to downsize the federal government, thousands of loyal public servants lost their jobs, many because they worked in programs or had once been associated with programs that made the federal government accessible to more people, responsive to more people. The idea of government by the people, for the people, is antithetical to this administration. As Unitarian Universalists, the ideas of diversity, equity, and inclusion are honestly central to our religious faith. That doesn't mean we have to love all of the workforce trainings. That's not what it's all about. But those values are central to who we are. The new articulation of our values. We believe in generosity, equity, justice, pluralism, transformation, and interdependence, all centered in love. Equity is right there. We think that everybody should get a fair shake. Diversity is just another word for pluralism. There are different ways of doing things, different paths up the mountain, and the difference is a strength, not a deficit. And inclusion is really another word for interdependence. We can't do this alone. Lucy, you just gave me this, you illustrated this next sentence perfectly. It's not enough to be invited to the party, you have to be asked to dance. Now, I will tell you that I did something that I have never done before. I read an article because J.D. Vance tweeted it. I never thought I'd say that statement. And it was an interesting article. But I figured if I'm going to talk about how folks are scared of DEI, I want to know what they say about it. I want to know from somebody else's perspective, what is it about DEI that some people find frightening? Not this stupid, no woman could possibly be qualified to be the Secretary of the Navy, must be a DEI hire crap. Or worse yet, the vitriol that is going against any black woman who has any kind of professional job right now. It's appalling. But there is clearly a movement of people in this country, mostly, if not exclusively white people, who feel like they aren't getting a fair shake anymore. What's up with that? The article, called The Lost Generation, was written by Jacob Savage, and published in an online magazine called Compact. According to Media Bias website, because I looked it up, this publication is highly factual with a center-right bias. For comparison's sake, the New York Times is also rated highly factual with a center-left bias. The article, written by Jacob Savage, talks about how, as a white millennial man aspiring to be a television writer in 2016, the move to diversify writers' rooms kept him from getting a job. And in some ways, he's not wrong. I appreciated that he doesn't place the blame with women or people of color, but he said that the problem tended to lie with Boomer and Gen X men who were overrepresented in certain fields that would benefit from more diverse representation. The problem wasn't that the writers' rooms shouldn't have a diversity of people represented. The problem was the older white men who'd been there forever wouldn't leave, and so the majority of new hires had to be people who brought more diversity to the room. He quoted various folks in media, higher education, and journalism, what he called the culture fields, and shared statistics from these fields that showed that yes, in an effort to make up for historic inequities, that yes, white millennial men are in fact underrepresented in who's getting hired for these specific entry level with a future positions. Think tenure track professors. What I really appreciated, though, was his closing paragraphs showed a nuance and self-awareness that J.D. Vance and others are certainly lacking when they decry DEI efforts. He wrote, "But those women didn't take our jobs any more than the 50-year-old Hollywood lifers had. The lifers were still there. They're still there. And I'm not angry at the women and people of color who made it instead of me. People have the right, and in most cases the responsibility, to take the opportunities that are offered them. Or even at the older white guys who ensured that I didn't. Mostly I'm annoyed at myself," he wrote, "because instead of settling down, proposing to my then girlfriend, now wife, and earning a steady income that might support a family, I spent a decade insisting that the world treat me fairly when the world was loudly telling me it had no intention of doing so. I could see what was happening. I was being told point blank what was happening, and still I thought I'd be the exception. That if I wrote one more script, took one more meeting, that I'd slip through. But very few people get to be the exception. It's strange and more than a little poisonous to see yourself buffeted by forces beyond your control. But there's also a comfort in it, because it's less painful to scroll through other people's IMDb pages late at night, figuring out what shortcut, race, gender connections they took to success, than to grapple with the fact that there are white men my age who've succeeded. And I am not one of them. I could have worked harder. I could have networked better. I could have been better. The truth is, I am not some extraordinary talent who has passed over. I am an ordinary talent, and in ordinary times, that would have been enough." It's one thing to feel bummed, and honestly, even a little cheated, that you were part of the in-group for so long, and now the goal is shifted, and it's harder for you to be ordinary and get the cool jobs. You get to have feelings about that. It's another thing to believe that only white men could possibly be qualified for any jobs, and that anyone who isn't a white man must only be a DEI hire. This administration is made up overwhelmingly of white men and a few very specially designed for the male gaze white women. Yes, I know Marco Rubio is Cuban American. There are always exceptions. But unlike the past few administrations where it was seen as a good thing to surround yourself with smart advisors, and particularly smart advisors who brought with them different perspectives, this administration is only surrounding themselves with loyalists, and loyalists don't make you smarter. Loyalists don't stand up and say, "What the heck are you talking about invading Greenland? Have you lost your mind?" That's bad enough. But then what goes along with this huge crusade against anything DEI is also the fact that this administration is trying to turn Americans against one another by pushing blatantly racist rhetoric, especially against immigrants. Now, Trump has always used racist language and tropes to gather support for his anti-immigrant agenda. In his first term, he talked about all the murderers and rapists coming in over our southern border. There wasn't a grain of truth in that, but some people believed it. This administration is using tactics of authoritarianism to make people afraid. Because once people are afraid, they want to put their trust in someone they believe will keep them safe. They will put up with a whole lot of, we'll say, hogwash, because they're afraid. And this administration is playing the tactic of fear better than anyone. They didn't invent it. There was the whole Willie Norton commercials in the 80s, etc. but they are playing it better than anyone. They are trying to court women by saying trans women will assault their daughters in locker rooms. Never happened. They are trying to court folks by making us fear that Venezuelan gangs are running amok in our cities. They even said that Haitian immigrants were eating pets in Springfield, Ohio. This administration is trying to make people afraid of one another because otherwise, why are they deporting gardeners and construction workers and parents dropping off their kids? If you had any doubts that this is racism, pure and simple, just look at who he wants to let in. Who's the exception to the immigration rule? White South Afrikaners. And then they have to make people fear the folks who are supporting our neighbors. Because frankly, it is not good optics to shoot moms dropping off their kids in the middle of the street. It kind of looks bad. So that's how we get the radical left domestic terrorists weaponizing their cars. Because when your father-in-law sees that Renee Good was just a nice, friendly mom, we start questioning the whole system, and authoritarianism doesn't like us questioning the system. In 3 weeks, I will be preaching about faithfully resisting authoritarianism. Our social justice team is bringing forward a congregational resolution for us to consider, and I'll be preaching on that topic on February 8th. It will give us all a chance for a deeper dive into how to maintain democracy in times like these, and what faithful resistance looks like. And in the meantime, I am choosing to travel to Minneapolis this week to answer a call to clergy from all denominations to come support immigrants and other folks in Minnesota who were being terrorized by ICE agents. This is the civil rights issue of our time, and it's time for me to gather with people of faith in support of those directly affected and to learn techniques for supporting our own immigrant neighbors. I've done this twice before. In 2016, I joined with 500 clergy in supporting the water protectors at Standing Rock in North Dakota. In December of 2018, I joined a similar number of clergy in San Diego to protest Trump's proposed border wall. It's time to go again. I have warm clothes, my dad's biggest worry. I will do my best to be safe, but as they put on the call, no one is safe in Minneapolis right now. I will put my trust in the fact that shooting a bunch of clergy people is really bad optics and hope for the best. Because ICE has tear gassed and pepper sprayed clergy people in the last month, as well as children and babies. I go not only for myself, but for all of you. I am representing you. I carry your hopes and dreams for a better world with me. And if you want to support what I'm doing, you are encouraged to go downstairs and sign a protest sign and this stole that I will be taking with me, carrying your hopes and prayers with me. We have fabric markers. I have a deep level of privilege in this world, like Heather was saying. And it is time to go use some of it to stand with my neighbors because I truly believe that we are better together. We are better and stronger as a diverse union that honors everyone. The clarion call of most religions, ours included, is to love your neighbor as yourself. It's time to act on it, my friends, even if that involves some risk to me. Because I don't like where this country is heading, and we need to change the trajectory while we still can. May it be so. Blessed be, and amen.